Two Parkies in a Pod is powered by Parkinson's UK, the charity that's here to support every Parkinson's journey every step of the way. Wherever you're from, whatever you need, visit parkinsons.org.uk for more information.
Hi there, welcome to Two Parkies in a Pod. I'm Dave, he's Kuhn, and this is your backstage pass into the unfiltered world of living a good life with Parkinson's. How you doing, Kuhn?
I'm doing very well. Talking of backstage passes, did you get one to your recent Bruce concert, Dave?
No, but I got very close.
You got very close.
Yeah,
touch him?
Almost within touching distance. Didn't quite touch him. He doesn't have to get the restraining order on me yet, but yeah, brilliant in Manchester.
You feel good after?
Very good. On a high after a bit of a Bruce fix, perfect.
You've got another one coming up as well.
Yeah, I'm off to Milan, so amazing. Life is good when you can see a bit of Bruce.
Wow. Wonderful. You all right with the crowds? And you were standing, weren't you, for several hours?
Yeah, I stood for several hours. Met a lovely lady called Dot and Kaz who actually do a bit of work for the Light of Day Foundation, which is the Parkinson's charity spotted out Parkinson's. Gave me a bit of a fence because I was in the pit.
A fence? As in, gave you some space?
Yeah, where the crowd barriers are,
Yeah.
allowed me to prop against that, so perfect.
Oh, very nice.
I could stand for three and a bit hours, which is how long Bruce does these days, age 75.
Well, that sounds like your balance was pretty good, Dave.
Yeah, my balance was good, and that's what we're talking about today. We've got an expert called Laura Douglas, co-founder of Neuro Heroes, a highly qualified group of physiotherapists who specialise in neurological problems. Laura is an expert in gait and balance. Let's hear what she had to say. Laura Douglas, welcome to Two Parkies in a Pod.
Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome. Yeah, it's strange having a live studio guest, isn't it, Dave?
In my kitchen, yeah. Just tell us how you ended up at neurophysio, because it must have been quite an interesting journey.
Yeah. Oh, good question. Well, I actually started off doing sport and exercise sciences at uni. So always loved kind of human biology, always been fascinated by how the body works. So did that in a kind of activity setting first and with sport and exercise, and then decided I did want to go down more of a clinical route. So went on to do a master's in physio straight after that. And you kind of learn on the job with physio. So you do lots of clinical hours and training in hospital settings usually. And I just love my neuro placements from the start. It was always something interesting going on. And even now, 15 years later, always so much to learn about neurology. So I got into it just through trying a bit of everything and didn't turn back when I became a neurophysio.
Do you have any personal connection to Parkinson's and MS and things like that?
Not personally with those two conditions. I have a cousin with a spinal cord injury and I grew up, alongside him, and that was always fascinating to me from a neurology point of view. But always worked a lot with MS and Parkinson's since starting in neuro.
Do you see a lot of similarities between the two conditions?
Oh, I mean, yes and no. They are very different conditions and quite different groups of people that are affected by them clinically. So often it's younger women that are diagnosed with MS. So you're often crossing paths with people who are in their 20s and 30s. And as we know, with Parkinson's, we're seeing people diagnosed younger and younger, but usually it is a bit later than that. And they have very different sort of pathways as conditions and progression, but I think a lot of the symptoms overlap. So certainly we're seeing people who are losing strength, having difficulty with balance, coordination, and things like gait rehabilitation all play a big part in the role of a physio in both conditions for sure.
Gait is your sort of expert field, isn't it? You've moved us beautifully onto that. Just tell us the problems with gait and Parkinson's. What goes wrong?
Oh, well, lots of different things.
What is gait, firstly?
What is gait? Good question. Gait is walking.
It's walking.
So gait's the snazzy term for walking. Gait is the process of lifting one foot on the floor and putting it in front of the other. And walking is sometimes referred to as controlled falling. Walking is a series of steps, but actually you're using momentum and you have to stop yourself from going too fast or too far. And because of that, it's a really complicated set of coordinated movements. So we talk about different parts of gait when we're helping people either sort of relearn to walk, maybe in some situations, or thinking about changing their gait pattern. So some things we might see is what we call a festinating gait, which is that kind of shuffly step or fast little steps that you might see people with some Parkinson's having sometimes, not always. We might find that people catch the ball of their foot quite a lot as they're walking along. So a physio working on someone's walking and doing gait rehab might be looking at all of those different things and strategies we might be able to put into place so that people can overcome those things, or maybe look at reasons why they're happening in the first place. It might be something quite simple like a shortness in someone's calf muscle that we can stretch out over time, could help with that. But it might also be some sort of thinking and movement strategies that people can put into place themselves to help self-manage improvements in their walking.
It's fascinating gait that you mentioned. Is that tend to be in advanced Parkinson's or not?
Not necessarily. It's a symptom that some people face relatively early on, but maybe when they're frozen. So it might be something that is quite intermittent and it's not a consistent feature all day, every day. But some people might find in a common situation where they freeze, like a doorway is quite a common one that we see, that coming out of that situation where they're frozen, they might have a few festinating steps, so tiny little steps. And a quite common feature of that we see is where someone's head and their weight goes forwards, but their feet can't really stay underneath them. So it puts someone in a bit of a tricky and a risky situation. It could lead to a fall if they can't sort of manage to do any bigger steps. But it might be quite subtle. It might be something that people have and it's not a huge limiting factor for them, but it is something they experience, especially after freezing, maybe once they stand up and they're trying to get going.
But you could have fascination of gait without freezing, can you not?
Yes, you can. Yeah. And you can have it, especially when you're starting to move. So that sort of intention to move is there. I don't know if you guys have ever had this feeling of you want to move, but you can't quite get the drive and the impetus and the message to the muscles to do the movement for you. That is the situation where someone might have a bit of fascination. It's
quite weird because you say starting to walk. Once you start to walk, you can't stop sometimes. You carry on going. If you're crossing the road or something, buses coming, you're walking. You got to go. Exactly, yeah, you got to go.
Yeah, and that's where your shoulders and your head being further forwards than your feet is quite a risky feeling position to be in. You've got to try and get your feet caught up beneath you. And there are some strategies that really help with that, like using bigger steps and counting with your steps, things like that are what we call cognitive movement strategies. So using something where you're kind of using your thinking skills to override some of the physical barriers. So that can be really helpful.
Give us a few tips on that.
Yeah.
What you do to improve your gait and your walking.
Yeah, so a couple of really common things that I've used in clinical practice with clients one-to-one is where if somebody has difficulty getting going. So firstly, standing up and just getting your balance first is a key factor, rather than what we often see is we all do it. We stand up, we go straight away, we're in a rush to get to the toilet or to answer the door. And if you haven't got your balance on that first couple of steps, then it's really hard to regain it after that. So just take a beat in that first moment of standing, get your balance, and then go off and step into whatever you are going to do. But at the same stage, there's a couple of really useful things that you can try. So before moving off, if they find that first couple of steps quite tricky or feel like their feet sticking to the floor, shifting the weight side to side can be really helpful before trying to go. It kind of preps your body for that pattern of walking without actually walking. So it makes it easier to lift that first foot and then take a
shift
step.
The weight of your body from one foot to the other.
Yep. So you're standing on 2 feet, but you're going right, then left. It's sort of your weight, your hips are going over to one side, right, left, and then your step right, left, and go into your steps from there as a kind of precursor to walking. Similarly, some people find counting really useful in that situation. So not while they're stepping, but before they step, getting into a bit of a rhythm, saying 1, 2, or saying left, right, then joining in with the feet, or sometimes a physical tap. So like a tap on the leg, tapping your hand on your leg. So it can be quite subtle. But again, that can help people get into a rhythm.
Mm-hmm. This is a cues you're talking about.
It's a cue, yeah. So there we've got a kind of auditory cue, like a sound cue, your voice. Some of these are internal, or you can use an external cue like a metronome beat, or a brilliant one. We use it all the time in our exercise classes, the beat of the music. So walking or moving in time to the beat of the music really helps a lot of people with fascination, with their walking, with their balance, because it gives you that external cue to stick to.
We've got a 2 Parks in a Pod playlist on Spotify. It goes 121 beats a minute.
Exactly.
So once you get going, it keeps you at that pace, it's quite good.
Yeah, a lot of people find that really useful, so they can check that out.
Excellent. And you were talking about standing up there. Both Dave and I, just before you came, we were recounting our experiences of standing up from a seated position quite rapidly, and often we'd feel a bit dizzy. That's, from what I understand, called postural hypertension. Is that right?
Yes,
is that what you were describing there?
That can be a quite separate symptom, actually.
Okay.
But yes, it's something that people with Parkinson's often experience. And that feature of standing up or moving positions, coming into an upright position, and someone's blood pressure suddenly lowering and maybe giving them that feeling of dizziness. Is that what you get?
Yes.
Maybe a spinning head, or lightheadedness.
Yeah.
And it's something probably all of us have experienced at one time or another, but it's very common in Parkinson's to get it a lot of the time. So if you do have that and you've not discussed it with your team, then that's definitely something to talk about with them, because sometimes it's something medication might help with, but also things like hydration are really important in postural hypertension, and making sure that you're safe, because it can make you feel quite dizzy and lead to fainting episode.
Dave and I are looking at each other now because we both fainted as a result of this.
Really?
It's quite scary, isn't it, Dave?
I was in Australia, walked around Uluru in the hot weather, sat down, stood up again, went bang. And luckily there was a doctor on hand to just check me over, but, quite frightening when you're not used to collapsing like that.
Horrible feeling. So it's something definitely to be careful of, but talk with your Parkinson's nurse or your neurologist if you experience it and it's not something that you've kind of been diagnosed with formally.
So we're talking about gait, but we're also talking about balance. I mean, they're obviously so interrelated, aren't they? How is balance in Parkinson's impacted?
So balance is a complicated thing. It's a really multifaceted part of the way we move. And postural instability is one of the key features that we see in Parkinson's, not necessarily always at the beginning or when you're first diagnosed, but alongside bradykinesia, so that's your slowness of movement, rigidity, so stiffness, tightness in muscles, and tremor being another really common one. Postural instability is something we see a lot, and it's a complicated one, because if someone's balance is poor and they're not able to control their posture and their balance well, then that is also affected by those other things. So slowness of movement, if you lose your balance, it's harder to recover because you might not be able to react in that really snappy way that we'd want to. And equally, rigidity comes into this as well. So you can't necessarily move in a flexible and smooth way that you'd want to recover your balance. So in Parkinson's, it's not just the postural instability that's the problem, but actually some of those other features come into play as well. But it is something we see a lot, and it's a big part of people's day-to-day because we're always keeping ourselves stable. It's very rare that we are standing still. We might sit still a fair bit, but actually once we're up, we're usually on our way somewhere, or we are going up the stairs. We're moving for a reason, aren't we? So to be able to control yourself in a stable and upright way is a complicated and multifaceted thing. And even when we're standing still talking to someone, we're probably moving our head and nodding, or turning to look at them, or turning to get our drink, so it's very rare that we're standing still. So there's a lot to think about and control.
Yeah, there's a lot to it, and there's a lot going on without us realising it, right? The mind and body often are in automatic mode and doing these things, but actually there's a lot of complexity behind it. You mentioned stairs there. I have some problems with navigating stairs, but mainly going down rather than up the stairs. And I hear that's quite a common problem for people with Parkinson's, going down generally, whether downstairs, downhill. Have you come across that?
Yes, definitely. Down is hard. It's really hard to control all of those things we're just talking about, balance, but also from a strength perspective, hard to control going down steps or down a slope because you use your muscles in a different way. So your muscles are actually having to lengthen slowly. It's called eccentric control, whereas when you're going up the stairs, you're powering up in a quick muscle contraction. And we tend to train more if we're exercising, train more on the fast stuff and the powerful stuff. And actually the slow controlled stuff is important as well. So you need a different kind of muscle strength to go down the stairs, but you also need to control your balance, have smoothness of movement, and be able to control your balance with an open space in front of you, which a lot of people find from a confidence perspective, psychologically really difficult, because you've not got anything in front of you as a backup if you were to lose your balance. So there's lots of things that come into play going down the stairs. But certainly if you have difficulty coordinating movements or with smoothness of movements, that's an area where it's going to affect you. And we know that balance and smoothness of movement control changes if you're feeling anxious or nervous. So suddenly finding yourself at the top of the stairs in a theatre, for example, you've got lots of people around you. There may be not a handrail. That's a really, really tricky situation that some people find themselves in, and they feel very challenged and might need a different amount of support than they would usually, because it's that extra level of anxiety and challenge than they might be used to at home.
I'm wondering, when you're in that situation, maybe at a theatre or whatever, is it best to lead off with your weak side or your strong side when you go downstairs?
So you want your stronger leg to lower you down.
Right.
So you would put your not so good leg down first, so that your stronger leg can be lowering you slowly down to the step below. And you might take it one step at a time, right? You might do step together, so that you could repeat that pattern. But yeah, something like the cinema, good example, you don't necessarily have a handrail on the steps. So sometimes people find going sideways a little bit easier, so that you're not facing down the steps, but facing sideways along them instead. But it might be that you need a little bit more support in that situation, holding on to someone's arm, even if you know you're quite capable of doing stairs in other situations. It's very contextual. Balance depends on where you are, what's around you, and just the noise and people around you might be very distracting and change your balance quite a lot.
You touched on that because, people around you, it causes stress, and stress really affects my Parkinson. I feel my arm shaking when I get stressed. I'm sure my gait's affected by stress as well. When you're in that situation with loads of people trying to get in through the same area, it really affects me.
Definitely.
So I had that yesterday at the station, at Clapham Junction Station, which, if you're not familiar with London, Clapham Junction Station is one of the busiest stations
in the world, isn't it?
Yeah. And lots of stairs there, right? And lots of lifts. Most of the time they don't work, though, unfortunately. And what I do is I just wait for everybody to go first, because the anxiety that's brought on from having crowds of people around me when I'm trying to go down the stairs, particularly by myself, is just too much. So I just wait for a quiet moment that I can do it myself, because I have to hold on to the rail. I can't do stairs without either a rail or the support of somebody, normally Helen or Dave. One of the main challenges I have, I'm not sure how I can describe this, but I'm almost hopping down the stairs because I've got this tightness in my calf that I think is what you're describing as the elongating action is somewhat restricted in my right calf, so it's unable to take a step down. So I get these dystonia spasms in my right calf, which prevents me from stretching it out properly and prevents me from taking a step down. Is there something I can do for that?
Yeah, well, it sounds like there's quite a few things coming into play all at the same time, doesn't it? And what you're describing with that tightness in your calf is important, because a set of stairs is actually quite deep often. So you need quite a lot of flexibility in your ankle and range in your ankle to be able to lower yourself down. And some people just don't have that. So they are therefore limited from the off. And it might be that you've lost some range in the flexibility of your ankle, as well as that lowering with control movement being hard. And it might be something that you practice, but you make it easier at the beginning. So you could do it at home, standing on a book and lowering yourself just down to the floor from a book, rather than a big step. Make it a chunky book or a little step if you've got one at home. But just practicing that one movement slowly with control. And we're talking about lots of other elements here, but actually practicing it in a way that is safe, and you've made the environment work for you. So you're not practicing it in Clapham Junction Station, you're practicing in your quiet kitchen where you'll feel safe, you've got something to hold on to next to. And that's always the best place to start. If you've got a difficulty or a challenge or something you're struggling with your balance, start off simplify it first, and then build up. So use support when you're practicing those things. And then as you feel more confident, you might take away a bit of your hand support, or you might make your step a bit bigger, or do more steps in a row, but with good quality of movement, but after some practice. And you might need to do some stretching as well, because there's probably more than one thing happening.
Step by step, literally.
I'm thinking there's no quick fix, is there? Everything takes time, slowly.
Slowly, but having some movement analysis is often really helpful with a physio, because it might not just be caused by the reasons you're aware of. And it might be there's a few other underlying things there that you can have an impact on. Rigidity or stiffness in one muscle is something you can do each day. Do some stretches just while you're watching TV or before you go to bed. Might actually feel quite nice, and you kind of might be more comfortable for it. So having some time with a physio, if you can, will allow you to kind of analyse what's going on and what some of the root causes might be of the challenge itself.
You mentioned that practice is important. When it comes to something like stairs, I find a lot of people just avoid the situation, which has the opposite effect, right? They're not practicing. Do you see that? Is that common, avoidance, when it comes to people with Parkinson's and challenges like balance, walking, stairs and so on?
Yes, it is a really, really common pattern. And it's something that as a physio and now running exercise sessions for Neuro Heroes, that we're really trying to get in there early with people and prevent, because it becomes a real cycle of doing less. So commonly we see someone loses confidence. Maybe they've had a fall, or maybe they feel wobbly, or they don't feel confident in a situation outside, and they stop doing that one thing. It might be a sociable thing. It might be a movement thing, a sport, an activity. So they do less of it and do more sitting. And of course, when we do more sitting, we're not challenging our balance at all. And it's really important to keep challenging your balance and telling those balance systems that you need them. Put some demand on them, just like we do with a muscle. We need to ask something from the muscles for them to work well. So if people challenge their balance less and challenge their muscles less, then they will get weaker and their balance will get worse, not because of Parkinson's, but just because they're not using those systems. So then we call that a secondary change. It's not caused by Parkinson's itself. And of course, with some situations, some people might find that they try and do the same thing a month later and they find it even harder because they haven't been doing much. And that leads to this cycle of avoidance and things progressively deteriorating. But it doesn't have to be that way at all. And people don't have to do things that make them feel really uncomfortable or really scared. But it's important to keep moving, to keep standing, to keep challenging the things that you do find hard, but in a safe situation. And that's a big part of a physio role, is kind of helping people get to the right level of challenge, I suppose, so that you're not avoiding things, but equally you're giving things a go somewhere really safe where you feel supported first, and then building from there.
Anxiety and depression are big in Parkinson's, and that's part of it, isn't it? People don't want to be seen in public and hide away and sit in a chair all day, and it's not good. You've got to get out there and be sociable. I'm sure the people who thrive when you see them are people who are sociable and doing plenty of exercise, aren't they?
Absolutely. And it doesn't have to be really extrovertly sociable. People don't have to put themselves in situations if they're not that kind of person. But I think group settings for exercise or exercising with somebody is always great because it keeps you accountable. Signing up to something, it means you've got to show up, and you've said to somebody else you're going to go. So things that are with other people automatically make you do a bit more, I think. And yeah, anxiety and depression, of course, comes into it because then it's hard to motivate yourself. And apathy is a big thing we see in Parkinson's as well. So, of course, for a lot of people, it's hard to get going. But what we see with exercise a lot in Parkinson's is that it has to be routine. So getting something habitually into your week is a great way of getting going and keeping going, because you've got to make it sustainable. And it's about keeping active. And as you say, Dave, being sociable so that you can do the things you want to do the sociable stuff you want to do, whether it's going to the pub or to the tennis court or, bowling with your kids, whatever it might be. But you've got to do some other things to enable that stuff as well and feel confident when you do those activities.
And for those people that aren't naturally sociable, or the condition is working against them in terms of their anxiety and not wanting to be in face-to-face with other people, particularly other Parkies for whatever reason, online works quite well, doesn't it? And a lot of the work you do is online group classes as opposed to, or in addition rather, I should say, to face-to-face. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. So all of our exercise sessions with Neuro Heroes are online. So
right.
all of our group things are all online. They're run over Zoom and they're run in a small group. So there's only ever a set number of people on each session. But a lot of people love that for the reasons you said. Some of it helps from a sort of social anxiety perspective, not necessarily having to get out and put yourself out there if it's not something you've done very much recently. But also from a convenience perspective, people who are working from home, they can log off their class and log on straight to their meeting a moment later. And it means that they can spend less time doing the kind of surrounding bits around exercise of getting there and getting changed and all of those things. So doing it from home is convenient. But what's really amazing and how COVID has helped us all is we realised that we can make community online and it doesn't have to be face-to-face for people to still have a connection. And we've found with our community, a lot of them have found great friendships and great support network all through Zoom. They live in every part of the UK, but that can really work well on community front as well as the convenience front of exercising from home.
And that applies to people with more advanced Parkinson's who, have got real mobility challenges, maybe not able to walk full stop. Are there classes that cater for their stage of Parkinson's?
Yes, we've got 26 classes across the week now, and they are split into 4 levels. So we have some classes that are purely seated. So that is doing lots of arms and shoulders and trunk core work, but also things like sitting balance, because let's not forget that you've got to balance when you're sitting on the edge of the bed getting dressed, as well as standing up doing stairs and things like that. So we work on those things where you need balance in sitting situations as well. And then we do some classes that are some standing, some sitting, starting to get people to do a bit of standing to build their tolerance of standing and get a bit of stamina in standing, because that's often what we see people say, I can walk a bit, but I can't keep going that far and I wish I could do more. So we're getting people on their feet more to get used to that and train up for that. We also have some quite slow meditative classes. We've got yoga sessions, some are seated, some are more up and down. And then we've got far more dynamic classes and higher intensity classes that are a lot of moving around for those people that are working at that level, but we group people by their level of ability. So anyone who does an assessment, we suggest the right classes that they're going to fit well into. So they're moving with people of a similar ability to them.
What sort of cost of that?
So starts at £10 a session. If you're a member, it's a little bit cheaper, but we do block bookings of classes that are around £13 a class. You can drop into classes if you want, but everybody gets a few free trial sessions. You can come and try a few different things and see what kinds of sessions work for you. And they're varied through the week so that we give different styles of classes so that hopefully people find something that works for them. And there's no pressure to sign up or continue as a member. You can just drop in ad hoc, but people find if they want to come to a class once a week or twice a week that they can become a member, and then it does keep them accountable. They know they're going to book in. People log in from their holidays. People are really committed, take us everywhere with them, which is great because people really want to keep their routine once they're in it and feel the effects if they don't keep it into their routine.
I'm looking at you, you've got a big smile on your face.
Yeah.
It obviously gives you a lot of reward.
Absolutely. We love it so much. It's such a lovely creative outlet for us to be able to design these classes that we want people to really enjoy. And I'm smiling because I see people smiling on the screen when we make them do silly things. And we keep this playful element to our classes because we don't want people to feel like it's a slog. Exercise is hard. It's an effort. It's got to be an effort for it to work. So we want people to be making that effort, but we try our best to use music and our personalities and our enthusiasm to get people really engaged and wanting to come back. And a lot of it is about that dopamine effect. People get that burst of dopamine from doing something they like doing, and that nourishes them and they want to come back and do it again. So that's the way we've designed our sessions so that people hopefully want to come week after week.
That's great. And £10 an hour, £13 doesn't sound too unreasonable, but for some, that might be a bit of a reach. Is there any concession planned for people that are struggling with that kind of amount?
Yeah, so we've started the Community Exercise Fund. So that's something that we have got support from Parkinson's UK from, which is fantastic. And it's a fund there for people who need a bit of either financial support or support to get going with exercise. So anyone that maybe lives in more of an isolated area or an isolated community where they don't feel confident to go and exercise in a group, or they just don't have that option to them. You know, there isn't always a Parkinson's exercise session close to home. This exercise fund allows us to fund people to come to 6 sessions for free, give them some nice tools, hopefully, teach them the way we're exercising for the best results with Parkinson's. Often it's not about what you're doing, but how you're doing it. So we want to teach people about how they can use that in other exercise settings as well. And then we can keep subsidising sessions for them if they want to continue this, but they might go on and use those tools in other forms of exercise too.
You don't need a lot of equipment either, do you?
No, gosh. So we've designed this all so that someone can do it from their sitting room, from their office. Sometimes we get people logging in from wherever they work. We ask people to have some weights, but sometimes that's water bottles or 2 tins from the kitchen. And we often get people standing on a cushion. We'll talk about balance and our balance challenges later, but standing on some kind of cushion for some parts of the session, if it's that kind of session. And that's about it usually. A chair to do lots of standing work and maybe have something to hold on to so people feel nice and secure. But the sessions are all designed for somebody to take part in with minimal equipment and be safe at home.
You mentioned weights there. How important is it to have some resistance when you're exercising?
Very. So with Parkinson's, the exercise guidelines say you should be doing resistance training 2 or 3 times a week. And that means having something that makes the exercise harder. So that might be a band, like an exercise band, TheraBand. It might be weights, free weights, dumbbells, might be weights in the gym, but it also might be your body weight. Let's use a press up as an example. A press up is really hard. You're not using any weights or anything, but your own body weight is enough to make it a very challenging exercise. So there are plenty of body weight exercises you can do, squats and lunges and planks and things like that, where you don't need any equipment, but you can still work really, really hard. But we need that resistance training to put pressure on our joints, on our tendons, through the muscles, and we need to work those muscles through their full range in those movements so that we're building power and strength in the muscles. And it's about doing a few of those sessions a week, doing enough repetitions. So if you're doing a movement that's for strength, 10 or 15 repetitions, and then go and do that again. And if you can, again, so 3 sets of 10 or 15 if you can, because it's the repetition on the same muscle group that makes the difference.
And you're describing some exercises with cushions for balance. Can you just give us a few examples of what people can expect?
Yeah, so this would be in our higher level classes. So our absolute first priority is that everyone's safe during our online sessions. But in our higher level Parkinson's classes, we usually do a balance section, and we will sometimes have people stand on an unsteady surface. And that's really important because one of our balance systems is about the sensation in your feet, telling your brain whether you're standing on a nice steady pavement or uneven cobbles or squidgy sand, and we get that sensory information.
Proprioception.
Exactly, well done. So standing on a cushion makes that a lot harder. Your feet aren't on that stable surface, so your feet have to do a bit more work on telling your brain where you are and what to expect and how to react. So we want to challenge that balance system by making your feet work harder on an uneven surface. And when we're there, we might do some strengthening exercises. We might be bending down and standing up like a squat, but we might also be stepping on and off the cushion. We're going into a bit of balance stuff now, but often in real life, we're not standing still. So training your balance, standing still is not that functionally relevant lots of the time. So it might be that we're stepping on and off the cushion to practice that change in surface. It might be that we're standing on the cushion and moving our head. So we're turning the eyes and the head side to side, so you can't use your eyes quite so much. We often see people get a bit more reliant on their vision, and that's another balance system. And it's something we can change, and we want to prevent people getting too reliant on their vision, because in real life, we have to turn our head.
Well, can I give you an example of that? Because Dave and I were just talking about this before you came in. We recounted this on an earlier episode. Dave and I were walking down the street recently, and Dave sort of impaled himself on a thorn bush. And the reason he did this was he was looking down at his feet when he was walking. And I think that's the danger of what you're describing. From what I've observed of Dave, what's happening is because he's not getting the sensation from his foot to his brain, that proprioception, he's then over-reliant on his vision. And what that means is he looks down, and I do the same. And if you look at old people, they do the same, right? That's a perfect example of that, right?
Perfect example.
Thanks, Dr. Kewen, yeah.
Yes, just going to say, he's the latest neurophysio on the scene. That's exactly right. Shall we go into balance?
Please, yes.
Let's dive into it a bit. So you've described it really well. We've got these three balance systems. One is your feet and knowing where you are and what's underneath you. One is your eyes and using your eyes to see where you are or what context you're in. And the other is your inner ear balance system, your vestibular system. And these three things work really, really closely to help us coordinate that complex series of movements we need to stay balanced and to move around. So you're right. We often see people become over-reliant on the eyes. And that might be because the other systems aren't working so well. So we want to work out which systems are working well and which systems not so much. But it's quite convenient for us to use our eyes. If we are unbalanced, we find it easier to fix on something. So to look directly at something, it helps us all to keep our balance. But in reality, if we get to the edge of the crossing, we need to turn our head to look if any cars are coming. We need to talk to our friend who's standing beside us as we're walking along. We need to get to the toilet in the night when there isn't enough light for us to really be able to use our eyes. So actually, if we become so reliant on our eyes, the other systems aren't necessarily good enough at doing their job when they need to be. So a lot of balance training that we do as physios and in the online sessions is about challenging each of those systems. So we might do a fair bit with the eyes squinted or turning the head so that people can't rely on their eyes. And what that does is it makes the other systems work harder. We're putting a demand on them saying, come on, it's your turn now, feet. You've got to work out where you are, even though you're on a cushion and my eyes are closed. And it's hard, but we want people to get to the point where they are wobbling in that situation, because that's when the other systems kick in and say, okay, right, now we're working out what we need to do. And balance rehab involves you pushing yourself to that point of wobbling. So it's turning the head, it's closing the eyes, but it might be standing on a cushion as well. It might be not just doing those things, or we might swap some things in and out. But it might be that you're thinking about something at the same time, because one of those challenges in real life balance is that you're walking and talking to your friend and your phone rings. Which bit do you prioritize? And often as humans, we prioritize the thinking, the cognitive bit, and the movement goes downhill. So we need to train ourselves to be able to do a cognitive task at the same time as the balance task. And that's a really important part of balance rehab that we often don't see in enough depth. And in Parkinson's, it's a really vital skill.
Walking and thinking is actually quite challenging, isn't it?
I find it really hard to have a conversation with my wife when I'm walking. You know, I'm concentrating on just walking, and she thinks I've got mute, you know, because I can't talk when I'm walking.
Yeah, and that's really common. I bet a lot of people are nodding along, because it takes concentration, and we wish that it would all be on autopilot, but that's one of the things that is really difficult and changes in Parkinson's. It's not, some of those movements aren't on autopilot anymore, so we need to cognitively think more about them, which is fine until you need to think about something else as well. And actually, we want to get some of those balance mechanisms to be more automatic, so that you can, if you have a trip, think about how to be able to recover from that trip without time to think about it. Or if you're still talking to somebody, you know, of course we want you to prioritize recovering from balance, but you need to have practiced how to do that in that situation. So in Neuro Heroes classes, we often say we applaud the wobble. We want you to wobble. We don't want you to be standing still and really sturdy and upright all the time, because then you're not challenging your balance systems enough. So if I see someone sort of steps off their cushion to the side, of course, I don't want them to fall over, but I say, yes, brilliant, Kuhan, now you're testing yourself. So it's my job to educate people on what's the right level for them, how to make an exercise a bit easier or how to make it a bit harder and layer up the challenges, either by moving the eyes or the head, or maybe adding in those thinking tasks. So an example of that would be an alphabet thing, name a food for every letter of the alphabet, or list off football teams or car brands, anything like that. And you can do, say, your daily Sudoku or your Wordle standing up or walking on a cushion while you do it. So it's something where you're having to test your thinking skills at the same time as physical. We call it dual tasking, multitasking. It's a particular challenge in Parkinson's, but we've got to train it.
Do you do the clock exercise?
Tell me more. Which one?
The 3 o'clock and you move your right foot out to the right. 9 o'clock, you move your left foot. I find that quite difficult because you've got to visualize exactly what you're describing there. You've got to visualize a clock face. So you've got to think and move. And it sounds really simple, but I find that really challenging.
And that's why we do it. It does need to be challenging. And you're right. You've got to think about that imaginary clock face. You've got to take your weight from one foot to be able to tap your other toe out to the side to your imaginary 3 on the floor. You've also got to listen to the instruction of which number you're going to do next. So in our classes, we're doing a lot of people are listening to the next part of the task. And then the task is going to change in another few minutes. So you've got to be ready for that. You might also be listening to music and watching the instructor on the screen as well in our situation. But those are the things that have been shown to improve balance the most in Parkinson's, the things where you are having to do several things at once, not just doing standard balance exercises. So something like exergaming has had good results because
exergaming.
Exercise gaming.
Right,
gaming where you're moving, like a Wii, because...
A Nintendo Wii, not a urinary Wii.
A Nintendo Wii, exactly. So you're watching the screen and listening to the instructions as well as moving. Or, brilliant example, which shows great results, dancing. Why is dancing good for balance? Not because you're doing a really hard dance move necessarily, but you're thinking about the steps, remembering what's coming next or kind of what series of steps or combination of steps you're going to be doing. You're probably listening to music and a rhythm as well. So you've got to combine that balance and movement with all these other sensory things. And balance is a really multi-sensory function. So I wouldn't suggest someone throws all of those things in the pot at once when they're starting out with balance training, but really that's what we need to be aiming for, challenging ourselves, because when you are walking along, Dave, with your wife on the street, you've got cars going past and distracting you, you've got a siren, you've got a text going off in your pocket, there's lots of things happening at once. We don't just do one thing at once. And historically in Parkinson's, we were told from research, just do one thing at once to stay safe. Don't try and talk, just get into the car, think about getting into the car, and that's all you should do. And actually now we know you should train yourself to be able to try and have that conversation while you're still moving, getting into the car. But the caveat there is if there's ever safety at risk, do the thing to keep you safe. So you might have to say to your wife, hang on, let me get into the car, then I'll finish the conversation.
Yeah, I think there is a conversation about a conversation to be had here, whether it's the right time to be speaking. I think it's okay, Dave, if you say in those situations to your wife or even to me, let's just take a break for a minute. Let's not talk. I need to focus or concentrate here. I don't think anybody will knock you for that. Actually, often I say to Helen, let's just have a period of silence here for a while, just to give myself a break and I can concentrate on things.
I find evenings are worst, I wake up in the morning, I feel like I've had a dopamine hit, My dopamine's back to normal levels. I'm almost normal. And then I go off about 8 o'clock, take my meds, and then off again about 10. So, if I'm walking, even when I'm fully medded up, I find it quite difficult to talk to my wife, It's very strange.
I was interesting to...
And you.
Yeah, yeah, that's quite taxing. I'd accept that. Interesting, I've heard you use the word improve a few times in our chat. You can improve these things, right? You can improve balance with Parkinson's, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can test your balance and train your balance. Balance rehabilitation is a whole part of physio. So absolutely, as I said earlier, balance is a bit like a muscle. If you don't put demands on the system, they will get sluggish. your systems get sluggish if you don't use them. So just like a muscle gets weak, our leg muscles get weaker if we sit or lie down in bed a lot when we're ill. They do get weaker. So balance can absolutely improve by training it. And we like to kind of get people to set goals for their balance as well as other things that they want to achieve. So whether that's maybe being able to walk along a beach, for example, or, it's a hard place to balance because it changes underfoot.
Or win at tennis.
Yeah, or exactly. Tennis is a brilliant example of where you're challenging your balance, but you're also thinking about where the ball is and where you've got to get to next. So tennis is a brilliant multitasking training, by the way. So you're ticking that box really nicely with tennis. But setting goals is important. And one really nice example of people improving their balance, one of our heroes called Ali, she really wanted to be able to get back to orienteering. And she has worked really hard on her balance and her dual task training. And now she says, which she really struggled with before and actually had to give up orienteering because of it. Now she can walk on uneven ground and read a map at the same time.
Wonderful.
And that's one of those things that, unless you think about it, you don't realize, of course, you've got to be able to look down at your map, look around your surroundings, know what's going on underfoot, but there's a lot to think about there. And now she's back to her competitive orienteering because she's really worked hard on dual task training. So getting herself thinking while she's doing those balance challenges.
What a great story. Brilliant.
What a great story. What other stories come to mind, or what other people come to mind from the Parkinson's community when you think about people improving or transforming? Other examples and other potential tips that you've seen from one person that you've reused in others?
Yeah, we've got example after example. I mean, that's why I love my job so much, because we just see all these improvements all the time. So at the simplest level, I've seen many people have a great improvement in their ability to stand up. So people that find it difficult to get out of a chair because they have to do many attempts at pushing up, and that gets tiring. So just with repetitive practice, once a week in an online session of going over, revising the technique, thinking of those cognitive movement strategies. So in sitting and getting up from the chair, it's things like bring your bottom to the front of the chair, tuck your feet underneath you, lean your shoulders forwards, power up. So we're giving.
Do you think of any of this stuff, Dave?
I do, yeah. I always move forward. Just push myself forward and then, lean forward. And then
Doesn't occur to, I mean, I've got challenges getting up from a chair, from a sofa, from a bed, but I never think of any of those things that you just mentioned.
Just do that. Okay. Do that again.
All right, we'll go through the points. So the most efficient way of getting out your chair, and these are points you can either write down and have by your chair if you struggle with it, or kind of really ingrain them in your brain, is to first shuffle forwards on the chair. So you want to be at the front edge of your chair. And a great example of where we often don't do that is in a sofa. We're in a deep, squidgy sofa. We're stuck at the back of the sofa and it's hard to get up from there. But actually, if you creep forwards to the edge, it's much easier. Then you want to get your feet underneath you. So again, a bit harder on a sofa because often there's not much space. But if you've got on a dining chair, you can tuck your feet underneath you.
Your feet underneath you as opposed to
Stretched.
Outstretched in front of you. Is that the typical?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So get your feet a bit further back than your knees. If your feet are in front of your knees, it's really, really hard to stand up.
Right. The angle's all wrong.
Try that. Yeah.
Right.
Just biomechanically doesn't work well.
Okay.
But not something we always think of or remember. So giving yourself that prompt, bring your feet back. Then you're either going to put your hands on your chair or maybe the arms of the chair. If you don't need the arms of the chair, great, do it with your hands out in front of you. Then you're going to put your shoulders forwards. You've really got to get a lot of forwards momentum for standing up, and that's where people often get stuck. Their weight is back, and they're trying to just push up. And actually what you've got to do is push forwards and up. So get your nose forwards, nose over your toes, push forwards, then power up. And you can use quite a lot of power on that stand up. Dave's going to do it right now.
Go on, Dave.
Go on, brilliant.
Well done.
No problem.
Well done.
Excellent.
I was watching you in that exact same position a few days ago, and you were really struggling to get up.
I'm going to go without putting my hands down now.
Hey.
Oh, now you're just showing off, Dave.
But then we've got to do the controlled landing, Dave.
Yeah. Yeah, I get bruised built the way I do it, yeah.
So the way down, you've got to really stick your hips out behind you and take your nose forwards again. Again, people often lean just a bit further back. So take your nose forwards and then slowly lower to the chair. So no crash landings is what you're aiming for on the sit down. But people look perfectly able and have the muscle power to stand up, can really benefit from those few tiny prompts just to remind yourself that the most efficient way for anybody to stand up is that. But we know in Parkinson's, a few things are against you there. So put yourself in the best possible situation to succeed. And I've seen so many people be able to get up first time just from practicing that. And that might be someone who spends most of their time in the chair. So that's a lot of the exercise they're getting in their day. And also people where they're on the tube and they find it difficult to get up and get out the door on time. So they've practiced that a lot so that they can, in everyday life, get that nice, efficient stand up, really sharp, and use it every day.
We people love that advice. They'll love it.
Yes, these are great tips. Can I just ask about dyskinesia? And a lot of what you're describing there relates to overcoming challenges of slow movement or stiffness, rigidity, and balance issues that you're describing. What happens if you've got dyskinesia on top of all of that? You've got this added factor that I think is my biggest risk of a fall is actually from dyskinesia rather than any of the more classic symptoms of Parkinson's. Is there anything you can advise or by way of an exercise that I can do to help in those situations with my dyskinesia?
And when you say it's your biggest risk, is that because it's taking you by surprise? You're maybe moving unexpectedly?
Partly, yes. It's the unpredictability of dyskinesia compared to something like a tremor, which I find more predictable and more manageable in that sense. But it's also just the swaying motion and going back to that stairs situation, going down the stairs. A lot of the challenges I have is to do with the dyskinesia and swaying from one side to the other.
I think one thing I would recommend there, and this is advice for everybody, but we know from the exercise recommendations in Parkinson's that it's best to exercise when you're feeling on. So when your symptoms are as well controlled as they can be and your meds are optimized. And I think there's a lot to be said for training yourself when you are feeling good, or maybe when your dyskinesia isn't so bad. So that in the moments when it is bad, you've got the strength, you've got the strategies, you have got those patterns ingrained in your mind, and you're well trained at what you want to do so that you have got a bit more capacity to deal with the dyskinesia. And that's where exercising when you're on really comes into play, because another example is often people find it's easy enough to move around on the floor on their bed in the daytime, but come the middle of the night, it's a very different story trying to lift the duvet up or shuffle across in the bed. But we try and practice those things as much as possible in the day when you're feeling good, so that you're prepped and as ready as you can be when things are harder in another context or another time. So I think task practice is important. So practicing the task that you find challenging when the dyskinesia isn't so bad is important. And setting yourself up so you're safe. And I think a lot of this is about taking things down a notch when you're starting something, or maybe if you're not feeling so good. Symptoms are going to change when you're under the weather, when you're anxious, like you said, Dave, or when you're stressed. Things do get exaggerated, don't they? So when you are in that kind of situation, bringing it down a notch, maybe using something extra to hold on to. So you're still doing your strength work, but you've got something nice and supportive, or using a walking pole for your challenges when you're outside. And then as you build more confident, building up again.
Yeah, I think it's good advice. I try and avoid doing things when I'm very dyskinetic from a safety perspective. The other thing we've done at home is we've put in a second handrail for the stairs as well, which has greatly improved. I can go down the stairs independently now using both those rails.
And some of it, I think, environmentally, you've got to set yourself up for success, haven't you?
You do, yes.
And sometimes it's a simple change and might be one you're reluctant to make at first, but actually, if it allows you to then do the thing you want to do safely and independently, then that's a success.
Yes,
well.
Which is why a good occupational therapist is so important, particularly around the home, right?
Definitely, yeah.
You mentioned rolling over in bed. That's a big issue for Parkies. Any top tips on rolling over in bed?
Yeah, well, there's the bullet points. Just like with standing,
Let's have it, yeah.
Same again. I think a lot of people get stuck in bed because they're on that squishy mattress, and especially in the middle of the night, if you're getting out to go to the toilet, there's a little bit of urgency about the situation. You've not been moving around, you're not warmed up. You might feel stiffer than you have in the daytime when you're moving around. The really important keys to moving around in bed are lifting your heels up, so you've got your knees bent and your heels close to your bottom, if that makes sense.
Okay.
From there, you can lift your hips. So a bridge movement, people might know that
so
movement.
So this is assuming you're starting on your back?
Starting on your back, correct.
Yeah.
So we'll come to rolling. But if you can get to your back, you can then dig your heels in and lift your hips up. From there, you can lift your hips to one side of the bed. You might just shuffle your shoulders over as well. But actually, that position is a great position to roll from as well. If anyone's struggling with rolling, lift your knees up, because then your weight of your knees can actually really help you get some momentum to turn as you lean to one side.
Roll over, yeah.
Exactly. So roll both knees to one side once you're at the edge of the bed. And then once you're lying on your side at the edge of the bed, that's a much easier position to sit up from through your side. What isn't easy biomechanically is sitting up from lying straight on your back.
That's a challenge for most people.
Exactly. But that's a place where people get stuck. If you're on your side, you can move around in the bed, but I'd say probably getting to that position lying on your back with your heels close to your bottom, rolling back to that is useful. And don't forget to use your arms if you want to roll over, reaching over across your body. And it's an exercise we do in classes, lying on the floor. Take your right arm, imagine you're reaching to the left corner of a huge bed, a huge king-size bed. Reach over, reach over, reach over. And that's going to help you roll as well, so that you're getting that trunk mobility, but also nice visualization to reach for the corner that helps you.
People often say they feel trapped by the duvet, when the duvet's on top of them. You have to move that first, obviously.
Move that first. But that's an exercise to practice in itself. Practice doing it with each arm in bed. Can you take one arm over you and lift the duvet off that side? Can you reach to the other side? Because if you can't do it in the daytime when you're feeling good, then it's of course going to be harder in the nighttime when you're half asleep. So good to practice those things when you're feeling strong and all right.
I noticed you're an expert in orthotics as well. Can you explain what orthotics are?
So in neurology, an orthotist is a job role in itself, and an orthotist is someone that uses often devices and aids, things like splints, to change the biomechanics of how someone's moving. And it might be all sorts of other orthoses or aids, but it's to help people biomechanically in function. So from a physio perspective, we might often work with an orthotist to do assessments of people's walking, analyze gait in a really kind of detailed way, work out what's going wrong in gait, and see if we can use some outside devices or things like wedges in the shoe. Insoles are an orthotic device. So all sorts of different things. Some are lower key than others, to be able to change the way someone moves.
I get dystonia in my right foot, so I've got an orthotic in my shoe, just an insole that goes in, just leans my foot the other way a bit, which I found brilliant for Parkinson's. It's really worked well.
Yeah, and if we've got a movement pattern that we're kind of quite stuck in, if your foot rolls in quite a lot, or if dyskinesia is making you move in a direction that is uncomfortable over time, or we tend to adopt a posture. So if somebody is in a posture because of their Parkinson's, because of their rigidity, something like that, and then muscles adapt to that. So if muscles get short and then it's hard to come out of that position, we might use stretches alongside something like an insole or another device that helps kind of bring someone out of that position or that pattern.
Just want to make sure we covered balance. Was there anything else on balance that we haven't spoken about that you want to mention?
Yeah, we haven't talked about putting some of this stuff into real life, I suppose. So we talked a bit about the exercises on the cushions, bringing in a challenge and how to challenge your balance systems. So standing on something unsteady or moving your head, taking your eyes out of the picture. But then I reckon people are going to be asking, well, how do I do that in real life? What do I do? And I wanted to go back to Dave and his thorn accident, because that looking down is so common in people with Parkinson's, but also people as they get older. We tend to adopt this forward posture and looking at where we're going. And it's very hard to come out of sometimes. And if you are that person, you'll know who you are if you look down a lot. I think for your balance training, one of the most useful things you can do is start to look up. So not all the time, because that's hard, but start looking forwards, even just every few steps. If you can look forwards for a second before you look down again. If you look down, you feel safe because you know what's coming right in front of you. You don't necessarily know what's coming a few strides ahead though. So it's a hard habit to come out of. But if you can start looking forwards and then start looking around, you will challenge your balance. Now, that's easier said than done because people might not feel safe doing that. So I always say try and do that maybe on a nice smooth path in the quiet corner of the park. So you're not with loads of people in a street environment. And it might be that you've got someone standing with you, or you're using a walking aid that you wouldn't necessarily always use, but just to give yourself that peace of mind. But start looking around you, because when you look around what's going on, you will absolutely be challenging your balance. And that's how we start to put the balance exercises into real life and inject that kind of functional stuff. So start looking at, if you don't know whether there's many chimneys on your street, start looking around at what's up and around you, because then you're not looking at your feet all the time, but make sure you're safe while you're doing it. You might just do it walking on the spot in your kitchen at first, turning your head side to side, but bring in those movement things while you're moving your head, moving your feet and your head at the same time.
I'm wondering about position of your feet as well. Is it best to have a wider gait?
Well, wider is safer, but we don't really want people to adopt that wide gait unless they need it.
Right.
So if you know you've got a wide gait, try and challenge yourself by bringing your stance a bit closer together. It's all a question of how safe you are and what context you're in. If you're in a safe exercise setting, try and bring your stance a bit narrower because you're trying to challenge yourself. If you're in a busy crowd setting with lots of people, do what you need to keep safe. So take your feet wide and use that aid, or don't have your conversation at the same time. And I think, as you said, Kian, I think it's absolutely fine to say to somebody, I just need to concentrate for a minute. This is a challenging bit for me, and think about just one thing at a time. But in as many situations as we can, we want you to have the balance come automatically so you can think about other stuff at the same time.
Do you find that people with Parkinson's tend to be quite hard on themselves?
I think they can be, yeah, for sure.
And do you find that they often compare themselves to what they were like before?
Yes, and I think that is human nature. I think it's really hard not to do that. I have a lot of conversations with people about that, kind of thinking and focusing about what you can achieve and making goals about what you want to achieve. But also, exercise and movement and all sorts of things might look different to how they did in the past. And I think there is an element of acceptance required with that. But anything you're doing, if you're doing any movement or anything that challenges you, that's a great thing.
That's a win, right?
Absolutely. And there's a lot to be said for maintenance. I like maintenance. If someone can stay as strong as they are now for the next few years, or as well balanced as they are now, we're not letting things get worse. So I think we've got to reframe it a bit sometimes, but maintenance is a good thing. I want people to progress with their strength training if they can, but actually if it's hard staying at the same level, that's a win. But I think be hard on yourself in that you can be competitive with yourself. Get that to push your training, get that to see how many repetitions of something you can do in a minute, or see how many sets of your strength thing you can do in one session. But don't necessarily compare to other people. I think comparing against what you can do in your own exercise settings is a really useful way of channeling that energy.
It's probably another more positive way to look at this. I find people with Parkinson's to be very resilient.
Yeah, I think we see a lot of people who are incredibly engaged, incredibly proactive. People like you who have read or have heard that what things can help them, and they want to do those things. Exercise is a great example. It's a good proactive step that people can take towards self-management. And I think anyone that's doing some steps coming away from just taking meds is great. Self-management encapsulates a lot of things, but it's doing all the things that keep you moving well, keep your mental health good, keep you engaged with social stuff. All of those things are really important part of Parkinson's management as a whole. All of those things are part of your Parkinson's management.
Self-management is very, very important. But I think listeners hearing you speak for the last hour or so would also recognise the importance of having a professional like you guide them on this journey, because it is quite challenging, particularly if you haven't entered into this world before. So I've taken a lot of comfort from the words that you've given us today, and I'm sure our listeners have as well, right, Dave?
Yeah, Laura, if people want to reach out to you, how can they get in touch with you?
Also, come and check out neuroheroes.co.uk or drop us an email, hello@neuroheroes.co.uk. We're on Instagram, so come and have a look there and just drop us a line. We'd love to have you along to class, show you what we do in our online sessions. If anyone would like to have a go, we'll organise that for you, have a few free trials.
Interesting. Thanks for joining us, Laura.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me.
Cheers,
Thank you.
Thanks.
Really interesting chat, that. And she's a real force for good, isn't she, Laura?
She is, yeah, and I think physios generally are. And what a great advert for neurophysios. If you haven't got yourself one, try and get one. Either sign up with Neuro Heroes, we'll leave links in the show notes, or try the NHS. Go through your GP, or in some boroughs you can actually refer yourself. So look into it, because they're worth their weight in gold, as you heard.
What really stood out for you there?
Well, a few things. I mean, firstly, as we've alluded to before, balance is a complicated thing. There's more than one thing going on often. And with Parkinson's, we're no longer on autopilot, as she quite rightly described it. And we have to pick things apart, relearn and adapt in some cases. So there's a lot to it. And my example of the stairs, you could see there was obviously more than one thing going on, and she was trying to dissect it. And that's what a good neurophysio can do. And I thought it was really informative and also very practical, the tips that she had.
Yeah, I like the idea of sorting out my walking and talking problem, dual tasking. She applaud the wobble, she said, where you stand on a cushion and recite the alphabet and things. It helps with that, so you can dual task in many ways.
Yeah, and I've been using that chair tip as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Really great tip, that. Bottom on the edge of the chair, feet underneath you, lean shoulders forward, power up stand. It's changed my life, that.
Yeah, likewise, I've been putting that into practice. And also the one getting out of bed as well, because I'm starting to have difficulty getting out of bed. I do like the way that they have a community fund as well, subsidised by Parkinson's UK. That sounds like an excellent use of money for people that perhaps can't afford their regular classes, or perhaps live in rural areas or have difficulty getting online. It shows what a charity like Parkinson's UK should be doing, right? Making this stuff accessible for all.
Yeah, 6 lessons you can get for free with Parkinson's UK, which is brilliant if you're struggling to pay for it. So,
and we'll leave links to all this stuff in the show notes as well. What else did you take away from that, Dave?
Just the positivity. Lovely, relaxed conversation.
Yeah.
Very, very positive. Loads of great information in there. We did over an hour with her. Amazing.
Yeah, we hope you enjoyed that chat and found it informative and put some of that stuff into practice. Wonderful positivity, and also a lesson not to give up, right? It's so easy to give up. My physiotherapist that I've had for a few years, I remember talking to her for the first time when I was doing an assessment, and I had to tell her I've given up my racket sports. And I wasn't very happy about it.
She gave you a massive kick up the arse, didn't she?
She did. She asked me why. And I said, I can't do it anymore. And she said, you can't do it anymore? Or you can't do it to the level you did before. I said, well, yeah, you're right. I probably could still swing a racket. And I remember that day after speaking to her and getting motivation from her, going out and getting a new racket and started playing again. So, these people, they motivate you and support you, as well as providing a professional service as well.
Your Parkinson's may be getting worse, but there are still things you can improve in your life.
Absolutely. And it's so easy to focus on the things you can't do, but take comfort from the things that you can do and get a boost from the community and professionals like Laura.
Adaption rather than abandonment. I keep saying it, but it's my mantra.
It's very true. And it gets tougher as you go along, but there's some amazing things that happen in this community.
Speaking of amazing things, perfect, Kieran.
Did you like that link?
Loved it.
People with Parkinson's do amazing things.
Go for it. Who we got?
We're kicking off with the remarkable David Wells. He played the drums in a London rock band as a teenager. Dave wrote a song called Walk With Me, which remained dormant for 50 years. Dave was diagnosed with Parkinson's, thought his musical days were over, but his friends are releasing the track. Amazing. This is a bit of it. Congratulations to Kimberly Campanello for speaking out about the difficulties of being diagnosed with Parkinson's age 41. My beloved Converse All-Stars had always been part of my identity, but when they became too painful and impractical, they had to go. She sold them on Vinted And this and many other Parkinson stories are in her book, An Interesting Detail by Kimberly Campanello. It's published by Bloomsbury Press, just £10.99.
Oh, I might get a copy of that. Are you a Converse fan, Dave?
I'm not really, because it's a bit flat for me.
You're now into Nike, aren't you?
Nike, yeah. I like the Nike
Easy
Easy-Ons, yeah.
Yes.
People with Parkinson's do amazing things.
Finally, a series of new videos have been created by Canadian artist with Parkinson's Barbara Salzberg-Matthews, friend of the show as well, using mime to help people with Parkinson's manage their symptoms. The Mime Over Mind series features 12 videos led by a retired teacher and former professional mime artist.
Well, worth a watch. And friend of the show, she's been on the show before as well. Look up that episode called What Parkinson's Feels Like. That was very, very good listen.
Don't forget, review, rate, subscribe. Perfect.
Sorry, I've got to run, got a train to catch, but we'll see you on the next episode, which features my neurosurgeon up for my upcoming DBS surgery.
Woo!
You've been listening to Two Parkies in a Pod, a Parkinson's podcast with Dave and Kuan. To get in touch, visit the website twoparkiesinapod.com or send your voice notes or emails to hello@twoparkiesinapod.com.